Hey everybody, welcome to episode 86 of K9s Talking Sense. This episode is a sit down with my friend Forrest Micke. Many of you know Forrest Micke from the Healer's Toolbox, which is a video on Learberg. Many of you have seen him with Michael Ellis. He's an extremely talented trainer, an amazing dog person, and just a great guy all around. He has a great diverse background, which we talk about on this episode. We go into a lot of different things. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys like it. Leave comments. Let me know what you guys think when you hear it. Please like and subscribe to our podcast and all the different podcast forums that are out there. Also, coming up, we have some of our seminars. I'll be in Australia this summer. I'm doing a really special one in the Sydney area with Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. Make sure you find them on the internet. You can find Glenn Cook, or you just go to fordk9.com, go to our events page, click on the seminar there, or just go to the K9 Paradigm podcast. You can find them on Facebook. Anyway, get a hold, sign up with Glenn Cook for that seminar I'm doing in Sydney, which will be at the tail end of July. Also, there's another seminar I'm doing in Australia, Puppy Cognition. Myself and Natalie are doing a Puppy Cognition with Becky Thomas of Ultimate K9. Also, go find her on the internet. Ultimate K9, she's located in the Sunshine Coast area, but it's the only place we're doing a Puppy Cognition seminar in Australia this year, so go find that one. And then lastly, our seminars in the United States. We're doing a K9 skill development seminar at Next Level Kennels in Henderson, North Carolina. That's the beginning of June, first weekend of June. And then the middle of June, I'll be in Cato Parish, Louisiana. Go find that. All of that's on our website at fordk9.com. You can contact the Cato County Parish Sheriff's Office, their K9 program. I have these various links on my social medias. Again, thank you guys so much for the support for the K9s Talking Sense podcast. Thank you guys for always coming out to these various seminars that I'm doing. I love you guys. I can't thank you enough. And let's now get into the episode. All right. Forrest, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cameron.
So, this is a fun one because I started this off with some questions that I sent out to the internet universe to see, what stuff people want to know about you. Plus, you and I have been now out here for a few weeks in the Michael Ellis School for Dog Trainers, as we got our little studio now set up here, just talking dog stuff. So I kind of want to just carry that on some more, but I also want to get to know you. So how did you find your way into dogs?
I grew up with dogs. I think a lot of people have a similar story, right? You grow up with dogs, and then you're interested in them in a way that's more than just having a pet dog. So I was always curious with the dogs that we had growing up, like teaching them things, like what motivated them to do the things that they would do. And I was close with my brother and sister. We would spend a lot of time in the woods. We lived near some woods, so there'd always be like a dog with us if we're building a tree fort or doing something. And so that was just important to my upbringing, is having a four-legged dog next to us while we're doing things. But I was always interested in some, I didn't really know dog training, but, you have some treats or a bit of your sandwich or whatever, and the dog learns to do something for it, and you give it to him, and so off you go. I didn't pursue dog training professionally until I was about 26 or 27 years old. So I went to, I did Army boot camp. I was in the Army National Guard after high school.
Okay.
And then I was an academic counselor when I finished my undergraduate degree, so I went to college, and then I did a master's degree. And it was at about 26 that and I was dog training on the side. In my undergraduate work in college, I had this associate professor that was a really cool gal, and she'd talk about her dog a lot and how it drug her around on a leash. And I thought, well, I could help you with that. And so I did help her with that. And then she must have been happy that her dog didn't pull her around anymore. So she passed me around the department a little bit. And that's the first time I ever took income for training dogs. She didn't like boost my grades or anything, but she did give me some money.
Yeah.
And so that was like a little side hustle that I was doing, but I never thought about pursuing it professionally. It didn't seem like a thing then as much as it is now. So it's definitely a thing now. But there might be some obedience classes or something you could find locally at your dog club or something. But it wasn't like some individual out there that's offering training experiences. But yeah, there was a time when I was 26, I was kind of tired of what I was doing, and I had thought a lot about doing some dog stuff. My dad and I built a building on the side of his property that he had, so he kind of allowed me to take this 3 acres of land that he had next to their house, put up a building. We put some kennels in there. It was a nice open space that I could train in, and then I went off to a dog training school, Tom Rose School, and learned some things there. Came back. And that's when it really began for me.
Okay. So let's go back a little bit. What was your military career? Like, how long did you serve? What was your MOS? Like, you kind of mentioned it, but just describe what the military life was for you and things like that.
Yeah, well, Army National Guard, so it's state funded.
Sure.
But I did go to Army boot camp at Fort Benning, Georgia. 11 Charlie, so I was a mortarman, so infantry. My brother was 11 Bravo. They do like 4x2 contracts when you join the National Guard, at least in Wisconsin at the time. So you get 4 years, and then for 2 years you're on an inactive ready reserve list. And I really liked boot camp. I could do a lot of push-ups, so they liked me. My handwriting was good, so I was the scribe. Where I've heard, in your class you were calling people scribes, the ones that were like taking notation, and so that brought me back a little bit because they'd always yell scribe, and I'd have to run down, and then I would have to write things on the board. But I loved it. I loved the weapons training. I loved the camaraderie of it. It opened my world up a lot. I hadn't been exposed to like different people from different walks of life in a way that I had there, and that was lovely. Like, I appreciated that as much as anything, and I took a lot of pride in the job that I did in boot camp. And to be perfectly honest, I joined the National Guard because I didn't have money for college, and I wanted it. I wasn't, gung ho for anything beyond getting my college paid for and not coming out without debt. And so I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, the 30th AG Processing Center, where you get all your shots and your boots and your stuff, when 9/11 happened. And so we didn't have a lot of information at that time. Eventually, we figured out what was going on, but it did kind of change, it shifted things within the whole military organization after that. But it was kind of peacetime when I got in. I thought I was going to sit around playing cards and cleaning weapons and hanging fire. But, so, yeah.
Did you deploy?
Nope.
Never had to deploy. Did they require you to do National Guard type things as far as like responding to an emergency within the state, or did you guys not really have much where you were at?
Yeah, by the time that my time was up, they were increasing funding to our unit, or maybe our brigade, in anticipation of going and relieving somebody else overseas. And we were at 110% capacity, so there was no stop-lossing that was going on, which was fortunate. And just kind of ran its course. So the unit that I was with eventually did get deployed for 6 to 8 months, something like that, a year or two later. So.
And you said you really enjoyed your time serving. And I would say people who may not know you all that well, and judging the book by its cover, you would not look at you at first and go, that's a military guy, when they see you.
Yeah.
How is that life for you, being who you are, and then the military life? Was it an easy fit for you? Was there some struggles dealing with
the man kind of concept that the military comes with, the rank and structure, and then versus being more free spirited, and or did you just say, hey, look, I'm adaptable, I can do this?
Yeah, I'm adaptable. I think it would be a tough pill for me to swallow now.
Yeah.
I think at the time I loved it. I loved boot camp. I liked the challenge of it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked AIT training afterwards. So I think it was because I was learning so much about myself and really cool stuff. The military, like the training, can be really cool. It was intense
Mm-hmm.
in boot camp. The physicality I loved, and then I had a sense of pride about it. So I looked up to I had great drill instructors. I looked up to them. So I wanted to be seen as a hardworking,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a good soldier to
Sure.
them. So that was cool. The afterwards in the National Guards afterwards, it was a much slower pace, and you'd gather on the weekends and do your thing, and you'd have your 2 weeks in the
Yeah.
summer that you'd go out and do stuff. And I liked the 2 weeks training that we'd do because it felt like we were really getting at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would come home from college on my weekend duty, and then we'd do our weekend, and it was kind of just a slow-paced gathering around there. Some of it was redundant, cleaning things that were already cleaned and going through training manuals, and
Mm-hmm.
and so some of that, wasn't the most
Sure.
thrilling for me, but it was cool, man. I
Yeah.
met some great people, and I don't talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
It was kind of uneventful, I did it honestly for the college money, and so it served its purpose there. But when I look back on it, the earlier part of it especially was nice for me.
Yeah. So, tell me about college. Like, what's your degree in? What was that like? And how much of that degree do you use today?
Oh man, I realize while you're asking me these questions, I don't just talk so much about like my past or those things. I know
Yeah.
they affect who we are. And,
Sure.
maybe people are interested in it.
Of
But
course they are.
sure. So I went to University of Milwaukee, and I got an undergraduate degree in communications. And there was a lot of it was kind of I had the sense because there were a lot of basketball players and other sport athletes that were in that program, I had the sense that it was kind of like one of the throwaway degrees. But I pursued it because I really enjoyed like the content of it. So communications degree, and then after that, I did a master's degree in business administration, so an MBA, and that was paid for too by the school, and yeah, and then I went on to work.
So, I mean, obviously, you've gotten to use some of that education and what you've done and what you've built because you're more than just a dog trainer.
Mm-hmm.
You've gone on and done other things in which we'll get to coming up. But so, like you mentioned, while you were in college, you started helping out with a professor and then some of the networking friends that came from the dog training. And that took you to Tom Rose School as your first foray into, I'm going to do this professionally.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe that time as you were learning to become a trainer? You went from like learning stuff on your own to then going, okay, I'm going to do this professionally, so I'm going to go to a school to do it. What was that like? What did you see during those times?
Mm-hmm.
How long ago was that?
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, when you were talking about like the schooling I've done and how I use that, I think there's a bit of irony because I feel like I'm about the least business-minded person that you could come across. I think I almost work hard not to be
too
that or
business.
something.
Yeah.
And I loved that schooling, like particularly the graduate program. It really taught me that, like if there's something you want to learn, you can go out and get it. Especially right now, like all the information's at your fingertips. You had to work harder back then, and there was standards to like what you were pulling up and taking in and referencing and that sort of thing. But yeah, so that's just a funny thing. Like I feel like I forget about that part of me.
Sure.
That's the appeal of dog training too. Is for me, it's it has a lot to do with self-expression as well. Like I'm a principled dog trainer. I'm always interested in what's going on. I'm a hardworking dog trainer in my own way, but there's an artistic quality to it that I am always hanging on to a little bit too. The Tom Rose School I chose because wanted to go someplace where I could immerse myself in it. I was looking to leave Wisconsin, not because I didn't like Wisconsin or my family or my situation, because I love all of that. But you like to go someplace and
Sure.
experience it, and it's new.
Yeah.
So that was part of the appeal, is it's a new experience. There weren't any other schools really that I found at the time. This was in 2007. I was looking around, so Michael had just started his
Okay.
school, but it wasn't, or he hadn't quite yet.
Gotcha.
I think when I left the Tom Rose program, he
Mhm.
had. But so it was like basically the only show in town, as far as like what I found when I was looking around. And I could go there. And I
Yeah.
talked with Tom a couple times before making a decision, and I went, and I connected with a student that was there ahead of me. I can't remember his name anymore, but he had this border collie, and he had sent me some videos and showed me all this cool stuff that he was doing, and he was kind of living my dream at the time. Right? I was going to get a border collie and have it doing all this cool stuff, and when I went to the school, I did get a border collie, and
Okay.
he did a bunch of cool stuff. But I did his longer version of the program, and I loved that experience too. So I don't know what the school is so much anymore, but I was interested in learning more about precision obedience, protection work, something that I hadn't ever experienced or seen, odor detection,
Okay.
and then tracking.
Yep.
So, and that was pretty much the program. There were some other things around it, but he had an awesome business model at the time. I don't know if you know too much about.
No.
Okay. So he had a school that me and others paid to go to learn from him. And then along with that school program, he had a training business. And so people paid to have their dogs come there and be trained by him, which was actually us.
Yeah.
And that was the most valuable part of that education, I think, is I trained something like 26, pet dogs, if you want to say it, during the time that I was there. And it involved keeping the dogs there for, at the time, he had 2-week or 1-month programs. And so we would train them up. We worked, with them every day, multiple times a day. That was a big part of the program. And then at the end, handing the dog back off to the people. And so learning how to do that, to pass what you've taught onto the dog, onto the person. And that was cool. That was invaluable. But he was smart, right? Because I'm paying to be there to train those dogs that are
And then they're paying.
they're being paid to train. So it was cool. I respected that about Tom.
Sure. No, I mean, it's like you said, I've seen the same thing in the law enforcement community. One of the bigger kennels in the United States does the same thing. He has his trainer schools, and the trainer schools are prepping the dogs that are already sold or going to be sold to the clients that are coming in to buy dogs. So he's got paid labor. But like you said, the thing that was valuable in both situations, what you went through and what those individuals do when they go to that school, is they get their hands on more dogs, and dogs of different levels and different drive aspects and motivations and so forth. So it cuts your teeth, obviously. How long were you at Tom's for?
5 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got how many dogs you said you did? 20 something.
Yeah, 26 pet dogs.
That's a lot of dogs.
Yeah, it is.
In a 5-month period.
Yeah.
So that gets your hands dirty.
Yeah.
So what would you say was the most challenging aspect of going through a program like that, where you're away for 5 months working a bunch of different dogs? I'm assuming there's a lot of other trainers there with you guys at the same time.
Yeah, we had 20 plus, I think 23 or 22 people that were in the program. Met some lovely people that I still have friendships with today. You said that you were going to traveling again to Switzerland.
Yeah.
And a dear friend of mine that lives in Switzerland, his son is my godchild. I met him at that program.
Wow.
His name is Etienne, so if you see him, say hi.
Yeah.
So the challenging part, probably, it wasn't so much of a challenge as it was an opportunity for me, and even a confidence booster when I look back at it. But, the program was laid out, and here's a path for you to follow by which you can train a dog. And I did like that. You and I have talked to Michael about things like this. Like, I first met Michael. There was no way that I would have said, like, he's got this system for training dogs.
Yeah.
The thing that I loved about him is that he had so much and could choose the things that the dog needed at the time. And and it was just good principled training.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't like he was doing the same thing for everyone. And so here was, this laid out curriculum for training a dog. I had a border collie. I still have him, actually. He's a very old guy, but there were certain things in the program that weren't for him. And Tom was good about. He was good about two things. He was good about saying, "Hey, you should stay the course with this because it will turn out okay on the other side." But he was also good if you recognize that something wasn't for you and for your dog. And I had enough, I guess, self-confidence at the time to say, like, "Hey, I think I'm going to take a different route with this. Is that okay?" And so that might have been the challenging thing, was finding my own way in certain areas, and then not letting that be a distraction from the class, from the people that we're going through. And that involves some conversations, too, with the leadership there, just saying, "Hey, like, can I train this a different way? I'm not saying to other people they should do it this way, but I just feel it would be the best thing for my dog." And they were lovely about that, of course.
Yeah. You guys went through, let's say, an obedience module of training. They showed you various techniques of obedience training, and then you also mentioned they had some protection stuff too, and then some detection. What was your favorite out of those phases when you were going through that training?
The detection stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
The protection there wasn't that much of it going on, and there was, like, I think I saw two people in a bite suit. While I was there, it was mostly with a sleeve, and Tom Rose is a Schutzen guy.
Sure.
But the protection wasn't really something that was going on a lot. There wasn't an active club there at the time that was like doing anything. There were some neat trainers that would come around on occasion that had dogs, and they were doing the stuff. But at the school, there wasn't so much of it. And there was just a bunch of different dogs. There's border collies and labs and pointers and a few Malinois and shepherds and stuff. So it wasn't the emphasis of the program at all, but detection certainly was. And I loved it. I loved that.
Yeah. Well, tell us, like, what was detection like there? How did they go about it? Was it sport related, like nose work, birch, anise clove kind of things, or did they also go into narcotics, explosives, and so on?
Yeah, it was narcotics.
Ah.
So here's how it went. And I love this. And to this day, I still, even like hanging with you and seeing how neatly you break things down, which is really attractive to me, the way that you teach detection, because like the way that I would approach obedience or training my dog for something non-detection is the way that you approach training detection. Like, you isolate these, you push the dog into certain concepts that it needs, and once it has those, you can isolate actual behaviors that you're trying to teach that are operant, and then you combine these things when enough of them are strong, and you make a stronger whole. And so that's how I make training, I think. So, but we did field searches, right? So I remember Amos, my border collie, at 8 weeks old. He liked, and I had this yellow Elite K9 ball that was hollowed out in the middle, and he liked it. And right away we had got methyl benzoate, so the pseudo cocaine formula, and I put a couple drops on it. And I remember just tossing it in front of him in some grass and letting him go, and he would go get his toy, right? His toy that always smelled like cocaine.
Sure.
And then eventually they get, they're eager for their toy, and they like to go and fetch it. You start hiding it, or you toss it and you disorient them, and you expand the difficulty of that. And the whole time I'm just kicking back watching a dog work. And the one thing that we were careful about was not to let them fail. So, like, make too big of a leap in complexity or something that they don't believe that they're ever going to be able to find it. And so I liked being outside. I liked having a dog do something without me. And I liked that I was accomplishing a lot within a simple, natural feeling setup, as far as I understood at the time, which was equating, the thing that I want him to have this independent. I was interested in that, like he could search independent of me, and it kind of automatically took me out of the picture, and had this dog that was really self-assured in what he was doing and didn't need me. I liked being outside doing that. I liked accomplishing a lot of things in a simple setup, and then it was quite easy when we started to orchestrate it more, like make it more of an organized experience. So So anyway, there at the point where Amos was, conditioned to scent or really onto it, I could take one of those elite canine balls and chuck it into a 2-acre field, like while he was, in his crate waiting or something, and then bring him out and tell him to search. And that dude just had it. There wasn't much I had to do for him to believe in his ability to to find that thing, and also to find his own casting pattern, and to work a room or work a space in a way that I didn't have to influence too much, and that was neat. At the time, we were setting up these like coins or rings, these flat rings,
Okay.
and we were tying like ribbon to them,
Okay.
so that the dog could see. And so you'd take these rings and you'd place them out here and here, and they just needed to be weighted, right? And so you would put food by them. And so here are these washers, and here's these ribbons so that the dog can see them, and they learn that there's food by them. And so we would set, 5 of them here going down, and then on the left you would stagger them and set 5. And so you'd point the dog. It's almost like blind searching,
Sure.
in IGP or something, and they would go run over and get their food. And all you're doing is drawing attention to these ribbons and saying that these are something you should look for. And then when the dog gets it, we would expand them, right? And so the idea is I could cast my dog to that, and that would be something that would invite him in, and I would cast my dog that way, cast them, so I could run up a field, and it really felt like almost blind searches. And then at some point along the way, you'd put the scent, right? Because you don't want them just, running,
Visual,
sprinting.
yeah.
You want them to understand that they're actually supposed to be searching with it. So I didn't have to do too much of that work with the Border Collie, because he just kind of had his own way, and I understood that. So that was a little bit of an unnecessary thing for me, but I saw a lot of dogs that benefited because they didn't know how to cast, or they didn't know how to reference their person and understand that if I point this way, you should run out. And so that was cool too.
Yeah.
So field searches.
It's like the beginning of directionals, basically.
Yeah.
You guys were teaching directionals with a target, with a reinforcer there. And when your hand went this way or that way, it created that cue to help that, like you said, it sounds like you would later pair this process to, well, now the target's going to be hidden in this environment, and maybe one of those directionals that you're giving will lead them to
Exact.
odor. Okay.
Yeah. So you just combine those two things. Yeah. And then Tom had this big rock wall at his school. The school was kind of built on this hill or this incline, and so this main building was built up higher and kind of built into this incline. And the parking lot was below, and then he had another building below, but he had this retention wall that was a big rock wall. And we were using Bill Jack a lot for training, like the mushy stuff.
Yep.
And, is it true you can't get that stuff like this side of the Mason-Dixon line or something?
The Bill Jack?
Yeah.
I got some of it here just the other day, actually. So
It used to be that way, I think.
did California ban the something in Bill Jack was not
Yeah.
allowed or something?
I don't know.
No, I actually just got some the other day. So ironically, I found it.
Yeah,
So.
cool. Maybe this was back then. right?
Sure.
Maybe it wasn't as available. So we would take that Bill Jack and we'd stick it on a rock, right? And then we'd bring the dog out and we'd have him on a leash and we would point at the Bill Jack. And so they'd eat.
Uh-huh.
And that's how we developed a reference for like helping the dog
Sure.
if we needed to. And then he had, the tubes on the wall that you could drop a ball down, and he had like a remote that he had taken actually off of a car,
Okay.
like an unlocking remote. And so he had a mechanism in one of the tubes that if the dog went and found the scent, right,
Yep.
that had that in there, you could click and the ball would drop. And so that's how we got our indications.
Gotcha.
And so the dog was really good at searching, really believed that, they were looking for their toy, which always smelled like odor.
Sure.
And so that was ingrained in them and strong. And then we developed that indication later on just by using those tubes. And it's felt really easy and fun. you
Yeah.
know, from that point on.
And there's something that I know that attracts both of us to dogs, which is the natural aspect, watching them do something natural with collaboration with us. And there's a beauty in that really shines in detection, because just like you said a few minutes ago, you have to just let the dog work. You're out of it. You're there to help a little bit, but the dog is the one in charge. We're sitting back and watching it. The aspect, which I'm curious, when you guys are taking what you did naturally, the hunting aspects, the searching, how did you guys start developing? I'm assuming this was a sit response when your dog would find odor. Talk a little bit about how you guys did that back then, building the sit. Was it separate from odor? Did it happen at odor? How did you guys go about doing the sit?
Yeah, they weren't that. It didn't need to be a sit.
Okay.
It could have just been standing and freezing there.
Cool.
And then the next step we took when we stopped using the ball dropper is occasionally we'd go up and pitch the ball between the ears. And so we were playing that game.
Mm-hmm.
And what was you mentioned the name the other day of somebody that kind of had developed maybe that method of dropping the ball between the ears or coming up.
Oh, well, so I typically share how detection evolved, and you can tell me if this was what you remembered. I was just saying, when I first started, everything was scratch alert. That was what I would call 1.0.
Yeah.
2.0 is when Kenny Licklider, to me, really got the sit stare really popular, and that was tossing the ball over their head and or reaching into a box and using your hand to pop the toy out of the box that the toy was already in there with the odor. Then 2.5 is what I would call where Randy Hare came in.
That was the name that was tossed around a bit.
Yes, and in that time frame, the early 2000s is when Randy Hare was much more popular. What he showed the detection dog community was, hey, look, there could be toys everywhere.
Yeah.
And the only place that your dog should engage or react is when you bring the reward right to where the odor's at. Theory being that the reward location at odor is powerful, which we all agree upon.
Yeah.
Like I said, why I call it 2.5 is because he showed us that we could teach the dog communication of searching and detecting despite major distractors, which at that point hadn't really happened yet.
Cool.
We were still, the level of trickery that dog handlers would do and still do to this day is trying to hide the toy and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. But Randy kind of put a light on there that said, hey, hold your toy in your hand, do anything you want, throw tennis balls all over the ground, all this kind of stuff. And the dog still had to work because the only place it could get reward was at the location of odor. And then, of course, what I call 3.0 now is the use of condition reinforcers to communicate that very similar thing. And the beauty of the condition reinforcer is I can be back here. I can
Markers,
be, it's so much. But all those, and Randy Hare was definitely a contributor.
Yeah. I think sounds like Randy Hare liberated a lot of us in a sense from some of the
got us out of the magic show
pain in the
stuff.
ass stuff that was going on. So we would come up, like with Amos, I'd come up and dump the ball between his ears, right? That was what we were aiming for, and he was often looking at me. Or whatever. But he did develop a sit kind of on his own, but also when we were doing high fines, like we got to do hide stuff, he would just stand on his toes and point at it, and that was just really enjoyable for me because the dog kind of got it. And I still think back on, I loved the field search aspect of it, like the power of the searching and plus pairing that right away with finding something that you want them to find eventually. And anyway. Yeah.
What would you say was, as you developed your skill as a trainer and being the intellectual type, like dissecting things as you were learning, what did you see as like, I wish this was better in the detection aspect when you were going through that? Was there anything that stood out? Like, because at that point it's all you knew, but was there something in you that you're like, I like it, but
I don't know that I'm an intellectual trainer.
Yeah, you are.
I do want to understand what the hell I'm doing, and it almost feels a bit defensive in a way, like a defense mechanism. Like certainly there was a time I was reading a lot of books, and I've been lucky to be around really smart people that talk about dogs in a way that makes sense to me. And I've always wanted to understand the why of what I'm doing, and so I think that's, as much time as I spent working with the dog, I've also tried to grasp the language and understand that stuff, and it just helps you have conversations too, and especially if you're wanting giving what you have to people, it helps you give it in a better way. The thing we were talking about, that space between when the dog indicates and when you deliver the reward, that's the thing that didn't drive me. It didn't bother me at the time. I understood there was something going on there because I was also making precision healing at the time. And I want, the dog stared at a precise point right in my face while things are happening, right? And they had to stay doing that even if a ball drops, a whip cracks, whatever the hell happens, until I mark. And so I knew, you know, like what I was aiming for there, and in other places where because we were doing tracking too.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
was teaching article indication with tracks, and I knew what that was looking like. And so then the space where you know, I'm walking up to reward the dog for a job well done, and the behavior's breaking down. Like I noticed it, right? But every dog was doing it, and nobody said that's a problem, and the dog stayed on task. And I knew when he found what he was looking for, and I trusted him, so all went well. But I've thought about that a lot since, and I've watched, like I've spent some time at Lackland working with DTS over there, and whenever I see them doing their detection stuff, I always wonder about that space, and I thought, well, I would do that a lot differently. I would want, just because of the controlling trainer that I am
Sure.
now. Or I don't know, it's like the attention to detail is a useful and lovely thing, and so I would want to also have that, I would want that attention to detail.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, to answer your
Okay.
question.
What would you now, so fast forwarding to all that you know now, share a little bit how you'd go about if you were in that position now, what would you do differently? How would you tackle that?
Yeah, that spinning wheel got me excited. When I saw that, I saw a video you put out. Natalie was working her dog, and you know, the sky's falling, and that thing's moving, and the dog is just on it until it's released from it. That made tons of sense to me, and so that's what I would change. I'd tell Tom to get a damn spinning wheel, and we would sit and proof the dog's indication or something like that.
Would you say it was the wheel or the fact that the dog's conditioned reinforcer understanding of that?
It's the latter,
Sure.
but the wheel seemed like a beautiful place to work out some of the kinks and to show folks that don't have the training eye what this could look like, or help the dog understand the concept faster. But absolutely, it's this idea that, you know, like as long as I've got marker control of this thing and the dog understands their job, like easy.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about this a little bit too. We had a fun conversation the other day just in the lounge talking about it. The pros and cons of multiple condition reinforcers. One that means reward at the location of odor, and then the other one that would mean reward at you. And we talked about you technically didn't have to have two. Two is useful, but if you're good with your criteria, one is just as powerful. Share a little bit about like your thoughts and feelings and kind of what we discussed about that.
In my own training, like if I'm rearing a dog, I'll have probably 4 markers. One is a duration, so keep going signal, and in the beginning it's paired with, you know, something so that it's worth hearing. The dog gets it. But terminal markers, I'll have at least 3, and it's useful in the obedience work. I look at the indication and detection. I feel about it how I feel about maybe like a dog focusing to a singular point in healing. And I know that in healing, if I were to say good, a keep going signal, and I were going to reward on that, and the dog looked away, I would not feel good about that. I would feel like I'm letting some really clear contractual relationship that I've worked hard to build fade away. And so I'd feel like I'm failing in some sense the clarity there. And so when so in the point that I would use that, then I would say, good, if the dog's on the right track, keep going. And I would always terminate, right? And I would proof the snot out of it. I got a ball in this hand, a ball in that hand, whatever. And so I'd go through the steps here, but I would always terminate to reward. And so when we were talking about it from a detection sense, that's how I would look at it. I would say, I can have a keep going signal here. And it means you've found it, you're on the right track. And I'm going to even come up and play around with now proofing your commitment to that. If I wanted to be that diligent about this, if I really, really wanted to own some really precise thing there. And then I would always have, you know, a signal that said, boom, you can get out of there now and actually enjoy your reward that you've gotten. And it sounded like, and we can actually talk through this a little bit, but that space that we're talking about, if I'm going to come up and deliver the reward in place, I would be a little bit bothered if the dog was waving their head around. And maybe I would have to let that go because maybe it doesn't matter that much, right? The dog is still there, but there's the person that sets clear criteria and really tries to train for those pieces because it's worth doing, I think, in a lot of places that would want to own some real clarity there. So if I said good, and the dog knew that they were on the right track and they knew I was bringing the reward up, for me, I would still aim for a dog that was really focused on where they felt that the source odor was. Would you be bothered by that, the dog?
It's a great question, and it's a debate that happens frequently within the detection dog industry. A segment says, I don't care how pretty something is, I just want the dog to tell me it's there. And you said that earlier when you were, as you were learning detection, that though the dog may not have had that pretty stare, you still knew it found odor. So there's a significant point to that is if you are good enough at reading your dog and you know those signals, that means my dog found odor. Then there's the other side of the equation, which is we want better precision and more strict criteria because as I've heard a saying, I think it was Bart Ballon that says it, kissing leads to fucking. So if you allow certain things just to happen, the behaviors are a little bit all over the place, but you're just, then that, like you said a second ago, degrades. So the ones who are more precision oriented really have strict criteria to prevent these other things from happening. A common one is licking source. Another one is, like you said, the head tilt or body. Like as soon as the head tilts, how long until the body tilts? Then how long until the dog just turns around? So this is where the two camps kind of start creating that debate is those that like, hey, I don't care. I can read my dog when it's an odor. It's all the pre-behaviors. It's the changes of breathing, how the body positions start changing, all these what we call the alert behaviors, change of behavior, and then the trained final response. So in some cases, there could be conditions in which a trained final response isn't feasible. The terrain they're on, location of the odor. So then that's where that argument comes in. They'll say, well, I don't see. What would you do then if you're Mr. Precise? What do you do when that can't happen? And can your dog, is it clear to your dog that if they can't get into that typical trained final response that you've built so good and so strong, what would they do then? And for me, my thing is, my job is to proof through that in training. Like, how can I, once I've built what you talked about, a good, strong, clear behavior, my criteria is the same, I'm rewarding these things, and I'm proofing it. Now, let's look at it when a condition may exist where I can't get it that way. What will my dog do now? And that becomes part of, then it flips back to the other argument. I know my dog, but I can build conditions that if this can't happen, this is also allowed. But I'm still strict about that procedure.
What that looks like.
Yes. And when we do that, that actually helps the dogs out. It requires more effort to tell you something's there than just popping into a behavior. So, and that's the other part of the argument that will come into play is the dog just offering a behavior to offer behavior, or is the dog offering the behavior because the odor was the stimulus that started that chain? And this is, like you said, as we get deeper in the weeds of training and the clarity of that training, systems that place a lot of attention on a trained final response sometimes create a dog who becomes very focused about doing a behavior for you, regardless of whether odor's there or not, or out of frustration when there hasn't been odor found or duration of the search.
I can feel that.
Yeah. So this is welcome to the world of
cool,
detection and the different stances that come within the industry. And there's relevant points to all sides. That video I shared just the other day of Michael, there can be truths to both sides of this thing. This
Yeah.
side is also true. This side's true. And
Yeah.
and what you bring up is where I kind of feel the same thing. I want to be as clear and as precise as I can, because the more clear I am, the more precise the dog does the behavior I want under those conditions. Even in the absence of that, of a way of doing that, they're going to be very strong. Like, its odor is here. I may not be able to sit perfectly or focus as easily because of whatever's happening, but because there's such a history to it, it's going to be completely unmistakable. You know. But to that point earlier, if we've proofed ourselves and thrown our dogs into lots of different conditions, we know what that looks like.
Yeah, if you're thorough in your training, you're going to have uncovered what that will look like. And I should say, I'm not a detection guy. I have no dog in this.
But it's fun to listen to your point of view.
But if you're asking me, I'm certain I would be having a detailed, focused response, not at the cost of vigilance and searching.
Correct.
Like,
That's a huge point.
I could see, like, now that I'm going in this little thought process here, this little think thing. I mean, I'm reflecting back to the border collie that was a very intense searcher, because I spent all the time doing the field searching, and I could have had a much more detailed final response, and it wouldn't have been at the cost of his searching. I don't think that the terminal response to this whole sequence of things would have taken away from what I had gained by that early work of imprinting odor. So, yeah, it is fun to think about. And you know, as we're talking about it right now, I was feeling a little bit excited about it all, because here's the so now all I'm doing with dogs is stuff that involves like both of us together. Even when they're going down to bite somebody, I'm still channeling a lot of that stuff through me. And so here's this sport that we're talking about, or this skill that we're talking about, where the dog has this independent side, and you can play with how you develop that, how much you want to be involved or how little. And I would love to be little at that portion. And then there's this end thing that could be very detailed and kind of slick and sexy. And I could see myself tinkering within that space too. And then how do these two things come together to create something that feels a little special?
That's the beauty. And what you brought up there, I loved, because when you're a detection dog handler and you're going through this process, whether you're new or you're experienced, you're going through the cost-benefit analysis. And what I mean by that is, my dog has to know the odor, but I also have to have a dog who's very good at searching. So searching and odor are very important aspects.
You separate those two things.
Correct. Right? And the trained final response is also separated. I don't want my trained final response piece to become overwhelming or pull away from the searching odor aspect.
It's not the priority.
Correct. Because just like I said, there could be a number of conditions that exist where a trained final response isn't feasible in the way that you trained it. Now, with that said, the industry for the longest time focused heavily, or a majority of training or points that instructors would make handlers pay attention to was all about this indication. And the sexy thing that sells online is really cool, very statuesque type indications. Where the shift needs to start happening more frequently is, how good is my dog at finding the odor under extremely varied circumstances? How it's presented, how it's hidden, how we do all of these things that my dog might face. What if it's what if it's in the ground? What if it's covered in some kind of masking agent?
Cool.
What if it's this many feet high, this many feet deep? And because what happened was, in a significant aspect, putting out odors was just simply putting out odor. You just find a drawer, stick a hide there. You can create some simple challenges, but overall, it wasn't that hard. It wasn't like you were training to combat the fact that someone's trying to deliberately get it past you and your dog. A lot of the hides aren't set up that way. They're set up just to acknowledge that we did training. My dog found the odor. We can do that with odor recognition testing. That's where that should really happen. What we should really focus on, and to prepare the dog for good detection, is the complexity in which odor is presented to the dog. It doesn't get shared. It doesn't get shared. I'm somewhat guilty of not sharing that enough. I'm
I've
changing
heard you
that.
talk about it a lot recently.
I'm
'Cause you're
changing that.
excited about it. Yeah.
Because I want, for those that do a lot of the bite work stuff, my joke is they'll do bite work scenarios that are like off the chain. Like, let's light somebody on fire, and will my dog bite them while they're on fire? They'll come up with like all these crazy scenarios to give their dog numerous different pictures of will my dog bite under this condition?
We've never done that.
Yeah,
I got a dog that probably will.
Yeah,
I can
right?
think about.
So, but we get that in depth with presenting pictures to the dog to like how would it engage under these circumstances? What are we doing to odor that's parallels? What cool ways can I have odor hidden, masked, location positions that I get really good at telling my even though it's difficult, my dog gets better and better and better at those situations and telling me, yep, mom or dad, odor's here. And can I read that dog to those nuances behavior? Because in some cases, it's going to be, that's the challenge. That's the part for me that I'm finding more and more fun is doing that. Now, I think a lot, there's typical restraints that have hindered that growth. Part of it
Like
was training time. Oh, well, to do that, I'd
In
have
an institution within a.
Yeah, because your training time is typically once a week. And you're training for X amount of hours.
Yeah.
And you have to train a bunch of other things, not just detection.
Check.
So the detection gets turned into just putting it out. And I would even say sport world. Now, their world's different. They're not as required. Their difficulty levels, progressively get more difficult. So they go from, NW1 to Summit, and that helps them get through that. The difference when you're on the professional side is there's, in many cases, someone deliberately trying to conceal this target substance from your dog. And sport doesn't have that yet, where we're deliberately trying to see if I can get it past the dog's nose. The thing I've learned professionally is many times, if I'm the smuggler or if I'm the person with bad intentions with explosives or firearms, I know I may not fool the dog, but if I can do enough to make you, the handler, not trust your dog, that's another aspect.
That's my job, huh?
Yes. So if I can get that to happen, which is unique, just being creative and how the substance is.
Food saver bags and Vaseline and
coffee
grinds.
I did one that was super easy as far as like the concealment was. It was just, I had det cord and I put it in a McDonald's cup. And det cord comes in a lot of different colors. And this one was like a bright yellow color with like a black stripe around it. So I put it in the McDonald's cup, put the cap on it, and pushed it out the top of the cup like it was a straw. So only about 3 to 4 inches were sticking out of the top of the McDonald's cup. And I put that out. Almost every dog went right to it. Like, here it is. Handlers were like, come on, back to work.
Wow, tricky.
Because they just saw the McDonald's cup, they viewed it as food and this. And in the narcotics world, a lot of those similar things happen. I
feel like you could have a side job as somebody that helps these folks that are trying to get
there are people that do that.
Like you could be a consultant, for
well,
the
there
cartels or something.
Well, no joke. There is
I make more money.
The cartels have employed. Not only have they employed, they have whole jobs of concealment. They have actually purchased drug dogs to test their concealment methods to see if the dogs could find it or not. So that has happened in a way, but no. The bigger picture is, there's the beginning stages, teaching my dog the joy of hunting and finding this thing, and then how to report to me they found it. What way do I want you to tell me you found it? Then my job as the trainer, handler, how do I maintain that? the next thing is how we start making this more and more difficult, as well as making sure my dog is honing in on what I want it to find, not just find the odd thing in this room that doesn't belong. Because many times training is set up where I'm putting out my training hides. That's the only thing in that room that didn't belong, or the only thing on that car that didn't belong. I didn't purposely put out other things that are stinky and smelly and don't belong. And does my dog ignore those and only focus? So that's another way of saying, of upping the game and putting myself as a handler in an uncomfortable position of, we have to figure this out together. And that's the collaboration part that I know someone like you and myself, we really love that challenge.
Yeah, you
So
spoke about it all like the other day as a dance, and that was really appealing to me. And I love to hear you talk about this stuff because there's just the problems that you have to address when you're training a dog in these type of tasks. It's fun.
yeah. So would you ever see yourself working a detection dog?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean,
It could be
I
whatever you
could
want.
I could see teaching a dog. So, I mean, I do scent work with all the dogs that I have, but we're mostly finding my scent on things.
Sure,
Because
sure.
if I'm saying I'm aiming at a sport, Mondio ring that's got one exercise in it, where the dog would have to go out and do that. So any dog that like the last 4 puppies I've reared to a certain age, I've had some like imprinting on that and actually going out and finding them. And so I always like that. The indication thing has always sat with me a little bit. I love that we just had this conversation, and yeah, man, who knows?
Well, I was gonna say, the more we keep hanging out,
Yeah.
we might find you
Yeah.
out there working the detection dog in some form
well,
or
I
fashion.
feel like the more that we hang out, certainly we're gonna like train some things. I'll be like, Cameron, what should I do today with this? And then 6 months from now, I'll have a dog that's quite a.
And I'm gonna look at you and go, figure out how get it past me. Let's how can you let's beat each other if we can at.
What would be useful? So here's a guy that is just a citizen, sport guy. If I was gonna if I had a talented dog that I was gonna train for this thing, what odor would I put it on?
It's a great question.
Because I'd want to go out and do something with it probably, but I'm not law enforcement, I'm not military.
Correct. That's a question we get all the time. So today now exists a chemical we call it novel odor training aid, and that doesn't exist anywhere in any environment. It's made in a laboratory only basically for this purpose. It's actually a calibration tool. It was initially called UDC, Universal Detection Calibrant. It was for sensors. It's a little Fido. It's a sensor called Fido, and this Fido sensor, Florida International University, Dr. Ken Furton and one of his students came up with a way to calibrate this machine that they could stick it into packages and different things to pull in air samples and see what's in it. So the UDC was a chemical that wasn't anywhere, but they could use that to calibrate the machine. So, okay, put the UDC in this thing, the machine would read it, give you the exact reading, so that way you knew the machine was working. And then the machine's programmed to find or alert to in the presence of these other chemicals that they're looking for. It's not like a dog, though. That's what it's not. It's only mobile by the person holding the machine. So you have to walk and test each thing. And in that chamber or in that box or whatever it was, or pallet of stuff, if that chemical was there, one of however many chemicals the computer was supposed to pick up on, they could tell you it was there. So not super efficient in comparison to a dog who can navigate a very big space, dynamically find odor, like follow like little traces and follow it to it stronger. The machine's not going to do that. The machine's just in your hand, and you go, yeah, okay, there's a reading here.
Yeah, fuck that machine.
Yeah, and especially they named it Fido, right?
But this is competition for the dogs that are out there doing odor.
As technology and K9s start to merge more, we will see some things piggybacking together.
Yeah.
But this chemical is something that people can train on and can purchase.
So I could get
Yes.
I could have access to this and train on it.
Yep, and then train your dog on that until you decide what specialty that you wanted to get into. And today I recommend the growth of the conservation detection discipline or field or industry. It is probably, to me, one of the biggest growing fields that is also very accepting or very in tune with scientific procedures when it comes to good practices when training a dog, good practices when it comes to storage and odor hygiene and things like that. But back to that other point you made, if I'm not military, I'm not law enforcement, how do I get into detection? Conservation is one of those fields that anybody can get into, and it's really impactful on a lot of things. One of the other podcasts I did was with a lady named Debbie Deshawn, and she has mussel dogs, the zebra mussels that are plaguing a lot of bodies of water, lakes in other states. They get overrun. So California kind of took an initiative to place these dogs at various lakes where the dogs will sniff the boats before they can go in the water. And if the dog were to indicate the presence of the zebra mussel, that boat's not getting on because they don't want to spread, because that's how it spreads around. Someone boats in one lake over here, gets it, and they transfer it over there.
Yeah, we had that problem where I grew up.
So there you go. So that's just one of many other things. Another friend of mine, Paul Bunker, he has a dog that detects, it can find oil in various beaches. And they're looking to see, is oil seeping up to the beaches? This a lot of it's in Texas. So they're looking to see if offshore drilling and things like that, are we seeing an impact? Were
you telling me about that odorless substance? Because I could train a dog on that, and now they have the skills for searching and indicating, blah, blah,
correct,
blah.
yeah.
And then I could actually pick the thing I'm going to work on, and I haven't excluded myself from being legitimate because I've trained him on something that wouldn't allow me. Is that what you're saying? That?
So and it's
I was going to find a buddy down the street with
I know, right?
some weed or something.
Exactly. Or just go to Australia where they train on Vegemite. And
we've got that at home.
But no, actually, it does have an odor. But like I said, it's a chemical substance that does not.
It's not anywhere else.
Yeah, it doesn't exist in our world
because that's a problem.
Of course,
if I've trained a dog on certain things and then I want to actually go out and do a job, and that job is meaningful, and they do something that's going to have to uphold in court or get somebody in trouble.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that pigeonholes a lot of breeders or vendors who want to get detection was, well, crap, what do I train? And here's Murphy's Law. I train this one on drugs. I'll put one drug odor on it, and then the next 9/11 happens, and everybody wants bomb dogs. And I have this one great dog, but I've already put drugs on it, so now it can't be a bomb dog anymore. And so that was a industry issue.
That's crazy.
Yeah, how do I train?
Maybe it's not. I don't know. It just seems crazy.
Yeah, well, but that's what happens. That was really happening with vendors and breeders who wanted to prep dogs in detection. Was, what do I use? So, in lieu of something like that, they would use, most cases, they would teach the dog to find a toy. In Europe, one of the most common things is there's different businesses and instructors who teach the dogs to find Kong, and down to like the smallest sliver of a piece of Kong. In many things over in the way that the legal system works over there, that can work for them. You're taking something obviously that's very valuable to the dog, the reward, the toy, and you're teaching it to find it under these going through all the steps.
Yeah.
Very difficult conditions, very low odors levels. You're getting a skill really taught. And then you go, okay, now you're also going to go find this chemical, this odor, whatever it ends up being for them. In the States, that's far more problematic, especially on the legal aspect, because of our legal system and the challenges that may get brought up. I can totally
see it and understand it.
Yeah,
it's just a little bit of a shame, because dogs are really capable, and we are more capable probably than we show up a lot of times in these things. So.
So that was a thing. So now, but the cool thing is we do have something. We do have something that anybody can purchase.
Cool.
I'll put in the show notes. Dr. Michelle Mon provides what we call the handler kit, which is just a get sent tube saturated with that odor already in it. It's there to train your one dog. Businesses like myself who train lots of dogs, we have a full kit of this chemical with various different levels to it and stuff. But yeah, so it exists now, and we're not so pigeonholed. If someone is saying, hey, I've got a great dog, I want to get into detection, I now have something I can train my dog the skills of detection and it not interfere into what I might find myself doing professionally or sport down the line.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I look forward to having you get into the detection dog world a little bit, because we look at things very similar as trainers, and that's the fun part. And it's really enjoyable when you can get around each other and be like, okay, how do we let's do this.
Yeah.
Can we do this? Let's
Yeah.
try.
Yeah.
And push that boundary.
I could see it when I can't catch dogs anymore.
Yes, I mean you're going to still be lots of diversity to you, I'm sure, with as you get deeper back into Mondio again, and to bring this back towards you a little bit I want to
quit pushing detection dogs on me, Cam.
No, yeah, right, yeah. I'll take you out of it right now.
I appreciate that you see me as a guy that likes to do a lot of different things.
Well, because it's the art of the dog. You like these different ways of.
I'm just really interested in all, just like you are. We all are. I'm sure everybody listening, right? We sometimes specialize, but
of course, it's different things motivate us at different times. I shared after 20-something years of doing bite dogs and police canine and special operations stuff and military stuff, I love doing detection now. Yeah, cool. For me, it's, again, because of a field that wasn't really looked at in the industry too heavily. Everything was always about the sexy, cool bite work stuff. And I've done a lot of that. Now I enjoy something different. And the challenge of, and the science that's happening in this world in detection was really also interesting to me. So that drove me. And it's cool to see, like you said, you were talking the other day, how you hadn't done Mondio for a little while, and now you're kind of reinvigorated. You've got some dogs that you're raising, and you're pulling yourself, more and more and more into that heavier competition aspect. Can I get up there? Yes, time will tell, right? When you finished, bringing it back to your story, when you finished Tom Rose, how long until you found Michael and started coming out?
Pretty quickly. Somebody actually mentioned him while I was at the school, but I didn't look into him. And Learberg had posted a couple of videos of him talking about stuff, and it really spoke to me. So I sent him an email. Said, hey, what's up?
Yeah. I'm almost impressed that he answered the email knowing that.
Yeah. There's a bit of a story. I sent him an email. I'd listened to a few of his things, and then he was working with his dog Pi, and I had a lot of friends. I had a few friends at the Tom Rose School that had gotten Malinois. I just didn't feel like I was up for that yet.
Yeah.
And then I met a couple people outside of the school that had Mals, and so I was thinking about a Malinois. I wanted to pursue some protection sports, and so I thought I'd get the tool for the job. And so I saw Michael, and kind of the way that he was speaking about dogs were the things that were in my heart. So he had kind of the words for the feelings that I had, and I think a lot of people feel that way about him. And so, and then I saw him working Pi, and that was really beautiful to watch. And so I had sent him a message about getting a Malinois in a year or so. I thought I'd be ready for it then. I'd be settled down in my business and have the dog that I had to a point that I could take on something else. And then it must have been a nice enough email that he did reply back to it. But he said that, so he said, find me in a year, we'll get you a dog. But he emailed me, I don't know if it was a few weeks later or a month later, saying that he had a Malinois puppy in the area that didn't have a home. The person that was going to take it could no longer take it. So if I was wanting to, jump that, like get
speed
a dog
up your
sooner,
timeline,
fast track my way to a Malinois. And so I had to think about that for a few minutes, and then I ended up getting Elzer. Okay.
Yep. And then
that changed my life completely. Yeah.
So you get this dog. You hadn't been out here yet, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
How long after you got that dog did you find your way down here?
Year and a half or 2 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So I got Elzer from a lady named Donna Mady, and she lived in Wisconsin near me. She bred her dog Jackson to a dog named Vodka. Those were Loup du Soleil dogs. Her and Michael had a friendship. Donna was a really successful competitor in Mondial ring and just a dynamite dog trainer. And so I ingratiated myself to her, told her I would cut her lawn or sweep her floors or whatever the hell I needed to do so that I could be around her.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I got Elzer from her because she had whelped that litter. And then we started training together, and she paid for me to go and learn with decoys, and she had so much knowledge herself. And so her and I were really tight for a couple of years while we were training, a year and a half. And then Michael was coming in every so often to do seminars there, and at that time it was just 6 of us. You know,
Oh, wow.
Michael would come in with pie and we would train, you know, and then he would go back home and come back again 6 months later. And there was a point where he called me, so I think we got along really well,
Yeah.
and I think he saw something in me as a trainer. And so I just remember as I'm raising Elzer, there was a point he called me on the phone to just ask how it's going, right? And then after that, we would touch base. Either he'd call me or I'd call him every couple of months, twice a month or every couple times a month. And I remember Donna telling me that was really weird because, you know, Michael doesn't get on the phone a lot.
No.
I'm kind of this, you know, the same way too. And so she said, well, you must have an interest in what you're doing. And then we opened up a conversation together about me going there and helping out at this school, which was growing. And so then that eventually happened.
Nice. So you got to be out here helping teach and share information?
Yeah, at this old building. I came in first and sat in on classes and then worked my dogs to support the things that he was doing, much like Lindsay did, who was there at the time. And then, as you know, he trusted us. We took over a day a week, sometimes 2 days a week, to teach a class that was going on. So
Yeah.
that was cool.
How was that? Was that a lot of pressure? Did you were like, holy shit, Michael's having me teach in front
No,
of
I was always comfortable with
Yeah.
it. Mike's a cool dude, so like
Yeah.
if he was gonna say go for it, then we felt fine. And we had a lot to share. You know, a lot of the people that were coming in were just new to it, and so we were, you know, especially myself, I loved, you know, sharing the things that I had with people, and so it felt really natural for me. And that was a cool time. Yeah, we were all training, and we had a great community of people around in California. There was more than me that had moved out to California, I think, to be closer to Michael and what we were doing. So there was two other people that were in my area that moved out there too. And so we had a nice little community for a while.
Yeah. And it's starting to happen again out here.
There's a great community here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a premier field here for, like, it's set up for monitoring, but just for dog training in general, and Michael's school and some serious folks. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, as an instructor, what is the biggest challenge that you went through early on, or what's still a challenge you go through today? And what advice would you give somebody, you know, that's getting into teaching other people or working with people with dogs?
The challenge for me, I think, has always been not giving too much. So giving the right amount, and you have to read the person to know what the right amount is. I still find myself like at moments where I want to give them more, or I want them to want it more, or something like that. Or I'll be focused on some detail, and I need them to understand why it's important, and they just don't care. And I'm like, but it's so important. And then I go back and have a conversation. Maybe it's not that important, you know, like this fucking final response we're talking about. Maybe it doesn't matter at all. Driving myself crazy. So that's always a conversation I have about it. Is, you know, the way that I might feel about something is not the way that somebody else might feel about it. The things I might choose to care about, and we're, you know, everybody's a little bit right.
Yeah, I loved that part. Where you say how much information to give. That's tough because, like you said,
you're a little bit the same, right? You're you're full of it, and you love to give it, and you're rich with this stuff, right? And so we got to read our audience once in a while.
For sure.
Not saying you don't read your audience.
No, I sometimes I don't, and that's, or like you said, being passionate about a topic that you're covering makes it where you want to share all that information about that thing, and they're not ready for it yet.
Yeah.
You know, there might be one or two in the audience that are there with you. It's tough because then added to it, and I know you've gone through this a little bit, when you're doing seminars, you have 3 days at best to be there, share, in many cases, tons of information, and feel good about being able to walk away after that 3 days and go, okay, I left them with good info, or met their expectations. Because I know a lot of times when I go places, people will feel like they want to do certain things with their dogs. Maybe they want to do some really complex searches or whatever. And we have to spend more time on the basics. A lot of the things that they might deal with or that they bring up in conversation that they want to work on, I can look at and go, well, that's actually started way over here in your basics. So let's clean that up. So then there's not enough time, you know, and the importance of basics is something, there's that saying, as the master, the person, the more skilled you get over time, the more you care about the basics. But when you're first early on, all you care about is the advanced stuff.
Yeah.
And that's so true.
Yeah.
And as we travel and teach with others, people want to do what we all like, the cool stuff, the challenging things. But as an instructor now, I don't want to, there's certain times I want to set you up for a learning opportunity. Maybe a failure might come from that. But I don't want to do it unintentionally. I don't want to do it because you just want to go do this thing. And I can already see,
a good point.
Yeah, how. So that for me has been something that's hard, I've had to try to learn and regulate my passion. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's
something I've gotten better at in the same line of what I said earlier was letting people come to things themselves.
Yes.
A bit. And so I think the dog will give us permission to move forward with aspects of training. You can see they're ready for it. Like I can add this piece clearly. And then, but a lot of it when you're teaching others most of it's about the person then, like working with the people. And there's something cool about having enough certainty in yourself and you can feel kind of the wisdom internally, like when I get it right, when I like leave something alone a little bit or let somebody come to their own conclusions, I'm always a little proud of myself. Like I could have tried to like give this to you or spoon feed it to you, but I went and touched you and like touched some place in you in the right way that inspired you to look a little deeper within your own framework or something and find it. So
I love what you just said there was I heard you and Michael say it the other day, and I felt it, I follow it, I just didn't say it the way you did. The dog giving you permission to move forward. Yeah. We all, so many of us move forward at a pace that we think, or we see a couple wins and we're like, yes, let's go to the next step. We don't have permission yet. The dog, in many cases, hasn't even reached proficiency yet, let alone fluency yet. And we get excited. I know I do. To let's go here. But when we realize we shouldn't have gone there yet, now we've added something that we have to undo and then reestablish, and it's that constant game. And that's the beauty of this is everybody goes through this in different ways and in different programs and stuff like that. But I love if we keep that mentality, we move forward when the dog gives us permission. That would, if that's our ethos and that's our shoreline, that will guide us so much better.
Cool.
To do, I'm
glad you like that.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. Because, like I said, I've felt it. I've followed it. I've also lots of times not followed it.
Yeah.
The excitement is what gets all of us sometimes. Or internal competitiveness, or keeping up with the Joneses, and other ones in my group, or that dog started the same time me and my dog started, and look at them. That's the beauty. We just have to sometimes, ego check ourselves and say, let's go at this pace. But no, that was a beautiful thing to, like I said, when I got to watch you guys talk about training, you and Michael, how you guys both follow that principle, and that's a solid one. That's the dog has to allow us, and once we do that, I know the success rate of whatever we train will just really grow.
And for the end result I'm looking for, it's helpful to get that if the dog is eager for the next thing or ready for it. Yeah, I'm a pretty conservative trainer too. I think sometimes to a fault, and so the balance between waiting around too long or something, or pushing them forward is. That's just experience. That's just being in the game.
Yeah. It allows you to, as a trainer, see around the corner of, preventing. I stole that from Marion, and he asked us the question, as a trainer, how do you see around the corner when you're working with students to help prevent mistakes from happening? And, both my answer and Natalie's answer was by living it ourselves. You've seen it, you've made that mistake. You've gone through that. So you can see these things ahead of time. You're like, ooh, I know if we keep going that way, the possibility of X happening is there. So if you're as a good instructor, is to know when. Sometimes you need to let that happen, so there can be a lesson learned. But sometimes you also have to help the human go, we don't want to do that because this is what might happen to the dog. And so you're using your wisdom and experience to share with others through your failures.
Cool.
So that was a good one. Who, obviously we know Michael had a big influence, and Tom Rose. Who's another trainer that you've really had an impact on your life as a dog person?
For decoy work, Joachim Devat. I would consider him a mentor for working dogs in the suit. Met a young guy recently. I'm kind of inspired by him. And our relationship is such that he's got a lot he can gain from me, and there's a lot I can gain from him. His name is Tommy Verschuren. He's a little bit of a time capsule. He grew up in a kind of a legendary Belgian ring club in Belgium. He's here in the States now, and he's talented and eager and cool and grounded dude, mature, so it's fun. Ray Coppinger, only because I had kind of a lovely weekend with him, if you would say. I'd read his book. I first ever heard Michael talk about him. He's an interesting guy, and then I went to a conference and kind of got drunk with him. And he's told all these lovely stories that I share on occasion. So, somehow, he's in my story and meaningful. Bob Bailey, who you and I met. If Bob trained dogs, we'd probably train him a lot differently. But he's a special person. A lot of the concepts and things that we talk about that we're onto in dog training come from him and his animal training. So he's really important, and he's kind of magnificent, like as an individual. We spent time with him in Arkansas, and that was really special for me. I think Donna Mady, who I mentioned earlier, is somebody that has been important at a certain time. John Soares, I used to spend a bit of time with him. We trained dogs probably very differently, but he was really good in his own way, and I spent some time around him, a lot of time actually, in like a formidable period of my training, and so got a lot out of that.
Yeah.
That's probably enough.
How would you say Doc Hilliard has affected you?
Stuart, I probably should have mentioned him.
I saved you.
Yeah. I think Doc is special.
For sure.
Yeah, I think and he's a bit shy and reluctant to be somebody that people would look to for like help. Dog stuff. He's this mix of, he's this charismatic, beautiful, soulful person. He's an academic.
Oh yeah.
A serious academic, Dr. Stuart Hilliard. And then he's a skilled practitioner. And so I think it's an incredibly unique combination of this really interesting, special person, dog person. And so I didn't know until I accompanied Michael down to a seminar at Lackland, and I stayed with him at his house. And at first I asked too many questions, and he was completely bothered by me. I was like, who is this eager guy? Like, I could feel it, I was like, shit, he doesn't like me at all, So then I
did he get up and just walk away on you at some point? Have you gone through that with him yet?
There was one time he's like, I was asking him, like, do you know this person? And he's like, I don't know, man. like leave me alone, And then I like sulked in my
oh shit, I pissed him off.
The hell. I remember being sensitive to that only because I really wanted him to like me.
Yeah.
And he's this beautiful storyteller too. He's got these
Oh, yeah.
magnificent stories. He's got this great journey and this history. He was over traveling around Europe in the late 70s, early 80s, and was fascinated with the Malinois. And he took all these pictures, visited all these clubs, and took all this documentation. And he still has this like folder full of these notes. Right, it's part of his
Yeah.
book that he's writing. And so like the record keeping that he's done for his life is incredible, and he's intimidating and impressive because of the way that his mind works for a guy like me.
Yeah,
and I
same
admire
here.
him so much. But so I stayed at his house. He was annoyed by me. I was like, chill out, quit asking so many damn questions. Like, just sit back and observe. But yeah, somewhere, man, we found our way. At the end of it, where I think he saw me and I saw him, and and since he invited me down to to come and work with his group down there in DTS, and we talk a lot.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
friends, and there's kind of a deep relationship that's forming there. And I think that people should know more about him. I think he should start a YouTube channel. I think that the way that he can take the academic side of him and all of his training in that realm, and the way that he thinks about dogs and understands, animals and learning, and the way organisms show up and survive in this world, and his practice at dog training, I think, is nobody's got it like him.
Yeah, he's
It's one of our missions, right? Is
Yeah.
to bring him up a little bit.
for sure. Well, what most don't even really know is CTS, K9 Training Systems, those video, back when they had VHS tapes, for those who didn't know what that was, Doc was a major contributor at that time. The first
that I
videos
knew.
I ever watched was Doc in a bite suit from Monroe, or it's a French company. I'm not saying it right. But and these were like thin costumes, as they called them. And then he was working at,
Pajamas.
yes, yeah. And he was working at Lacanois back at that time. It was his dog. And it was a pretty intense dog, but he was such a good speaker, so good at sharing information. And this is no joke. This is like 89 to like 95, 96 time frame. And the information he shared. Then he also wrote books. He wrote the Schitzen book, and how it affected me. So now I'm in the Air Force, which later on he goes to Lackland and takes over as a head of the training at that time. I'm following what his book says to do when it comes to outing a dog, which is just doing pressure into the bite instead of opposition reflex. So I'm applying what I'm reading Doc talk about in a book, and he's not at Lackland yet. And then fast forward, like 4 years later, he's at Lackland. I'm like, dude, the guy who I'm reading this, and I'm catching heat from following like the procedures that he's teaching in the book, but the dog, it worked. It had
cool.
results. That's how he affected me. But then over time, I mean, I view him as like a savant when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
To include the quirkiness of
Yeah,
it.
he is a quirky son of a gun.
Yeah, I remember
Makes
he had
a great guacamole.
well, the part I remember him, he had a squirrel called Harry Nuts, and a squirrel lived in his office,
Okay.
and Harry Nuts would run around the office.
I had no idea. I didn't know that at all.
You didn't know that story? Oh,
Yeah.
ask Doc about Harry Nuts.
Okay.
But he had a pet squirrel, and that was one of the things that we knew at Lackland. And,
Yeah, he's a lovely guy. I didn't want what I said earlier about him to sound like patronizing or something, in the sense that like more people need to know about him, because he's out there, and if you're in the sport world, then you would know. And he's
But there's been a
he's
shift.
high up. But I think that he could have mass appeal.
Oh.
if he would be comfortable with that.
hands down.
Because like the average dog owner should have access to a guy like
Well, like I said, for me, he was relevant early on in my career. Then when he went to Lackland, he's been off the radar, and now that's been 20 plus years. So the dog world needs Doc to come
I think so.
back to a level of sharing information to us.
Cool.
There's so many people listening to us right now who don't even know who he is. That if he does start sharing information,
We'll get him.
oh yeah, I mean we'll let the cat out of the bag now a little bit. You, Michael, and Doc will be doing something this summer, so that was something for people to stay tuned
Yeah.
for. There'll be information about that on
we'll let
Michael's
you know.
website, and people can come out and actually learn from all three of you.
I'm just riding coattails, man.
Yeah,
I'm just
get it.
along for the
I feel
ride,
the same
dude.
way. I'm doing that all the time. So I figure I'll get into the. There's only a couple questions that people had sent us to ask you, and let me go to it right now. Okay, so
You made a post on Instagram.
yes, I sure did, and I'm going to that now. So, okay, the picture of me and you. All right. So, if you could leave one legacy that would change the dog world forever, what would it be? Hitting you right with a tough one right from the start.
Jeez. Well, I don't think I'm that guy, right? I think that there's been some big shifts or important like moments in it, like maybe the Karen Pryor revolution, or even the way that people are using tools now in subtler ways. I think those are kind of legacy things. Maybe and anything that I would be doing that I think would be important is taken, from somewhere else. There's already established, but maybe something like what we said earlier, which is the dog gives us permission to move forward. Like patience, allowing the process to kind of play out. But people know that, so that's nothing to do with me. I do have. I would say like this comes from Francis Metcalf, and I think it's kind of somebody that has talked about this early on that really inspired me, which was to have interests outside of dog training, and that there are things you can do peripherally that will also support it.
Yeah.
Like that, sometimes I look around and somebody's playing guitar, and I'm like, that's dog training.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of the same way you look at it. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that for me, I felt always like naturally a student of this, which has caused me to go out and seek information from people that had something I was looking for.
Sure.
As much as I could go to the source. I never felt comfortable just jumping into one thing and saying this is the path.
Yeah.
So if like for better or worse, I've always had to go and grab other things. And so maybe I could encourage people to do that, to challenge their beliefs or to go seek other information and to play with it in earnest, like put it into practice and see if it's for you. I think I've been really good at that, and so that's something I could give to folks. And then to be, like I was saying earlier, have interests outside of it, so like develop yourself outside of dogs. It's a lovely thing that we get to do if we make a living doing it, or if it's our hobby or whatever, but we should have other things too.
Sure.
So I think that kind of protects you from getting a little bit like the burnout.
Yeah, and that's it's important because when you get as passionate about something, it can also wear you out. So having some diversity to what we do, but I truly think one of the things I just from the outside looking in is your willingness to let the dog give you the permission. And I hope that's something that you'll keep sharing as part of what your contribution to our industry is in the dog legacy world.
Maybe stay the student is better.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe that one. So if anybody's listening to that, just keep getting it. Keep seeking.
Keep seeking to be a student. Okay. If you could have lunch with anybody you wanted, who would you pick? I'll make sure if it's related to the dog world. The question is, if you could have a 1-hour lunch conversation with any person that has ever existed in the world, who would you pick?
Such a crazy question. I peeped this one in advance, by the way. I saw that when I came in. So I did think about it, and I asked some other people too.
What advice
how
would
do
you give
you
me?
pick
Yes.
one?
Uh-huh.
So maybe my answer will be my grandfather.
Oh, okay.
Who I didn't really get to know because he died early on.
Okay.
And I've got others that I would want to, and I'll mention. But
Sure.
part of the reason is that a lot of the leaders and folks that have been helpful to me that I would love to have lunch with. A lot of them, there's books written on them.
Okay.
You can know kind of what they're about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not Christian, but like if Jesus was a dude that was around walking, love to have
Yeah.
lunch with that guy. The Buddha, Siddhartha, or whatever that
Yeah.
the prince turned peasant
Yeah.
walking around, that'd be cool. Like a Gandhi type, Abe Lincoln, Tupac.
Mm-hmm.
Probably like to have lunch with Tupac. I think that would be fun. Jane Goodall, she's kind of my like celebrity crush.
Yeah, good one.
Sorry, Jordan, Jane
Yeah.
fucking Goodall.
Yeah.
She'd be cool. She's still alive. Like
Yeah.
maybe that could
Oh,
happen.
yeah.
Coming for you, Jane.
Yeah.
Nikolai Tesla.
Yeah, that's a cool one.
Yeah, I think that'd be kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Elon Musk.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that dude's wild.
Yeah, very interesting mind. Here's another one.
What about you? Just one though. I named 10, right? So I made it easy on myself.
Wow, turn the tables on me. Definitely, I would say Elon Musk, just because it's relevant to today.
Mm-hmm.
Another one would be Steve Jobs,
Cool.
just because how he saw things. He wasn't so much the inventor; he could take something and make it better. Like he wasn't the genius like Wozniak was. Like Wozniak was the one that could build the thing. Steve could look at it and go, "It could be this, though." And like in his story was, he saw this at a Xerox place. He saw what later became the mouse. It was a little wired connection that they controlled the Xerox machine with, and he was like, "All computers need that." And so it wasn't like he thought of it, but he could see it a different way. And I relate to that a lot myself, only because I'm not an inventor. I'm not like, I have like very little artistic skill whatsoever.
We're aggregators.
Yeah, I can see something and go, ooh, if you just make this change or you add this to it. That's kind of how the Odor Pays box kind of went further for me. Was by no means did I come up with anything related to the typical detection dog box that exists. All I did was like, ooh, but I like it if we added this to it or made this attachment or whatever that didn't exist right now. So it's just combining things. I could see that. So I relate to somebody like that. So that'd be cool to, like, do they see things and say, like, how did they come about this? Was this a skill? So what would your perfect training day look like? Place? Who with? Is it alone by yourself? What sport? Are you working on a behavior? Or maybe you already live it because every day you get to do what you want to go do.
I kind of already live it.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm pretty lucky to say something like that. I think I've had some perfect training days down here in the last month. And so that included a dog that I enjoyed, in that moment. Enough people that are better than me at the thing that I'm aiming at. That was important. Some people I was better than, so I can take and give.
Yep.
That feels nice.
Yep.
Beautiful weather, some open minds, some good food,
Absolutely.
good training, some purpose,
Yeah.
or some goals
Yeah.
that were reached. Maybe the only thing missing was my wife wasn't here.
But she got to be here for
She
the
came
last
down,
couple.
yeah. So, and I think back, so that was it. I think back to, and I think a community was nice about that. But then another perfect training day would be by myself. It would involve nature, being outside. I'm thinking back to when I was at the Tom Rose School, and this wasn't the perfect day. It just describes what one would be for me. And I've had many of them. I was alone. It was an early morning. I was doing tracking. I went out and laid 3 tracks. I had moved from the school to Tom Rose's ranch because he had a cabin there, and him and I had developed a relationship. He said you could rent that. And I was doing a bunch of tracking work. There was a 20-minute drive between the school and there, so I just lived out there so I could do that. I'd wake up in the morning, lay 3 tracks, roll a cigarette, just one at a time. I was rolling them. It's just part of a routine. Smoke it, and then I'd go run. My dog, he had 270 acres just north of High Ridge. There's cattle out there, but they would move them around, so we would track on the fields that the cattle weren't on at the moment. And then I would go do obedience training on the Schützen field, and I would maybe jump on a horse. He had these Pasifina horses, and I could ride them because they were mostly safe. And then he had water features, so some streams and a lake, and you could go swim your dog, make a nice meal, and and that was solitary time for me, and I really enjoyed that. The place that the moments I still find right now where that feel a little magical in training are often by myself. So
Yeah, I get it.
yeah, I mean it's kind of the spots I do it for. It's lovely to have a community of people.
Of course.
That's been a big theme of me being down here just this time, is how strong and the community feels, and how much I like the individuals that are in it. So.
Yeah, it's truly both aspects, growing and developing on your own, getting those moments of solitude and just self-reflection and just connecting with the animal you're working with. That's a beautiful thing. And then the community aspect of training with others that you're on the same page with. Like you can communicate without saying a word with each other, especially when it's multiple things happening, like decoy work and handling. Those are moments that are just amazing.
Yeah, and you want to hang out with them like outside of the dog training,
Yeah.
and you push each other to be better in life, just as you do when you're doing your dog stuff.
All these great conversations we have in a cafe.
Sure, yeah. But the community is important. Like, it takes a village, probably in anything that you're doing, and especially if I'm aiming at the sport monitoring, it takes a village, and that's been kind of something missing in the last 5-6 years for me.
For sure. Forrest Micke, thank you for coming on here, sharing these stories with us.
Yeah.
Thank you for motivating me and the conversations that we have to do things differently, validate things I feel, sharing things with you. Cognition has been fun to show you that world.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and knowing that we'll connect deeply going forward in the future. There'll be lots of these kind of, I'm sure, conversations we'll have for our different audiences.
Cool.
Because I think so many people will benefit from just different points of view. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Cameron. This was lovely.
Hell yeah, absolutely. All right, man.
Cue theme music.